Guys, it's Brian with Turp Mechanic. Let's talk about watering the lawn today. I've got my dad-to-be cup over here, but I'm not going to be a dad again. I've already done that 4 times. I don't do this often, but I'm going to work with notes here. The reason for that is because this is an impromptu video about watering the lawn, simply because I've had a couple friends of mine reach out to me over the past week or so asking about watering the lawn. It's April right now. This is when irrigation systems are turned back on, and people apparently have questions. I don't know why that was surprising to me. It truly is like one of the most obvious times in the world for people to have questions. Spring and summer, especially for those cool season lawns that struggle through the heat and the dryness of summer. Anyway, let's get into this here. Stick my notes there on the ground. First thing you need to understand, especially those of you who are really new to lawn care, a lot of you veterans out there know this. Standard rule of thumb is lawns need approximately 1 inch of water per week. So just imagine for your, imagine your coffee cup is sitting there on the ground. Imagine there is 1 inch of water in there covering this diameter. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but so imagine the entire lawn like a little bathtub of water that was 1 inch high. And then all that water seeps down into the ground. That's what 1 inch of water is in the context of putting an inch of water on the lawn. Now, of course, that doesn't happen. It comes from the sky, so it's going to rain over the course of an hour. You might accumulate an inch. Maybe it takes a whole day for rain to accumulate an inch. Via precipitation, you might get a quarter of an inch today and a quarter of an inch 3 days from now, and then you might, like rainy areas, this isn't really a problem. You just expect rain from the sky. But not everyone's like that. Dry areas or places that only get little bits of rain, you have to supplement with irrigation. If you go an entire week without any precipitation, you need to put it down via your in-ground or your above-ground sprinkler system. 1 inch. And the way that I recommend that you do that is have a coffee cup out here. Put your sprinkler system on and time how long it takes to put an inch of water into that coffee cup. You can put a whole bunch of coffee cups around your lawn and figure out which areas of the lawn are getting more water faster than others. But no matter what, at least put one out in the area of your lawn that you care about the most. Figure out how long it takes to get an inch of water in there. That's going to dictate how long you're going to be running your sprinkler system, because I recommend you water your lawn 1 time every week. And I kind of am against the grain on this. I do not believe that you should be watering your lawn every other day. I don't believe you should be watering it on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I don't believe you should be watering it 2 times a week. Do half of your watering on Monday and half on Thursday. I don't believe that. In my opinion, a lawn should be able to maintain itself if you're giving it water 1 time every week. And the reason that I believe that is if you're putting a whole bunch of water down all at once, then the water has nowhere to go except for down. So we put water on the lawn, it soaks in just like a sponge, and because we're putting a lot in, the water is going to sink deeper into the ground. And that is important because the root systems of our grass need to find water. And if the water is deeper in the ground, then on day 3 and 4 and 5, while the surface soil has dried out, there's still moisture deep down. And that's where we want the roots to go. We want them to dig as deep as possible. We want them to grow as deep as possible. And we will encourage that if we regularly give our lawns enough water on a consistent basis to get water to the deepest reaches of the root zone, the deepest soil profile that our roots can reach. Now that kind of covers 2 of the main topics here. I've got 10 here on my list, so I'm going to try not to be so long-winded on all of them. But my friend, and I've covered this on the channel before, my friend asked me when he should be watering the lawn. So I recommend that you water your lawn. Excuse me, I gotta hold this. The wind's gonna blow it away. I recommend that you water your lawn so that the watering cycle ends just after dawn. The reason for that is dawn is the coolest part of the day, regardless of the time of the year. So during the growing season in the spring, summer, and fall, the coolest part of the day means that there is the least amount of evaporation. It also tends to be one of the humidest parts of the day, which also means less evaporation. And you usually get the benefit of a little bit of dew or morning fog, that morning moisture, which means that if you are putting an inch of water on the lawn, that extra little moisture that you get from the air actually goes into the soil. You might actually be able to run your sprinklers a little bit less, like the duration slightly less, if you're running it first thing in the morning. So if you've got an in-ground sprinkler system with a controller or a timer on it, or maybe even it's a hose timer for an above ground system, set the thing to start watering before the sun comes up and plan for it to finish the cycle right at dawn or just thereafter. This is the best way to use your water and not waste it or not lose it to the sky, and also not have to deal with the fungal threat or the disease threat that happens when we're applying water to a very warm lawn. So that would be later in the morning, in the late afternoon, or in the evening. Now, going back to the coffee cup that you did, some lawns have multiple zones. My last house had 3 zones on the main lawn. This house currently has 2 zones on this main back lawn. And depending on how long it takes water to collect in your coffee cup, you might have a coffee cup that will accumulate an inch of water over the course of about 30 minutes. You might have a lawn where it takes 3 hours to accumulate an inch of water in it. So depending on your lawn or your sprinkler zone setup, if it takes you upwards of 3 hours to collect an inch of water in that cup, then I suggest separating your watering cycles. So doing zone 1 on, say for instance, a Monday, and then zone 2 on a Tuesday. That way both of them can get water in the same week, kind of in that same like pre-dawn time of day. But like if you had 3 zones and it all took 3 hours per zone to put an inch of water down, then that means you'd be starting zone 1 at midnight and zone 3 would be ending at 9 in the morning. It's just not right. The first zone is too early in the morning. It's not even really morning. It's like late night. And then the second zone is ending too late in the day, because during the spring and summer especially, suns are usually, the suns, we only have one sun. The sun is coming up pretty much anywhere around the country way early in the morning, usually around 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. In my last house, it was coming up around like 4:45 in the morning. By 9 o'clock, the sun is high in the sky and you're going to experience a lot of evaporative loss. If you have multiple zones and it takes a long time, split your watering. 1 zone on one day, second zone on the second day. If you have 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 7. If you have more than 7 zones, then use your best judgment, I guess. All right, that covers 5 of the 10 things I got on my list. Inch of water per week. However, to dovetail off of that, so here's a little offshoot. If you get a little bit of rain on a Monday, let's call it, I don't know, 0.1 inches of rain on a Monday. Pretend that you didn't get any rain and run that sprinkler on the same exact day. The reason for that is because soils will become hydrophobic on the surface once they dry out. So if you put a lot of water in, everything's wet, the surface dries out before the deeper areas of the lawn dry out. And then like a week later, if you get a tiny little bit of rain, the surface of your soil is a little bit hydrophobic. It takes a while for the water to start seeping in. It's not going to go deep if you get a little bit of rain. So you're going to want to irrigate right on top of that. Now you could dial it back a little bit. Instead of doing a whole inch of rain, a whole inch of irrigation, you could bring it back to maybe 3/4 of an inch or 0.9 inches. Basically, you shorten the duration of your irrigation session. But if you do it at the same exact time, you're going to be essentially taking advantage of the rain that came from the sky. If you get a very heavy downpour where you're actually getting closer to an inch of rain all at once, that's the only time that I would suggest resetting your program so that your irrigation session shifts forward in time to get well past the actual rainfall. I don't like just skipping an irrigation session just because we get a little bit of rain. Only if we get a lot of rain. All right, with that said, some places don't get a lot of rain or they don't get rain very often, especially the dry climates as opposed to the humid. We're not talking about humid here. Hydretain is a product that will help your soil retain moisture. So if you're getting a little bit of rain from the sky, or if you're irrigating once a week, you don't want to have to water this lawn every 4th day or 5th day or 6th day as the temperatures get hot, as we get closer to summer and throughout summer, then Hydrotane is something that you can spray down onto the lawn kind of in that mid-spring time frame, maybe late spring time frame, depending on your weather. If you put it on the lawn, then every time you water the lawn, moisture will stay in the soil a little bit longer. Scientifically speaking, it doesn't stop evaporation. But in my mind, this is the best way for me to understand how it works. It helps limit evaporative loss from the soil. The soil will stay wetter longer if hydrotain is in the soil. Now, I have videos on this channel about that. I'm going to link to them down below. I'm not going to go into detail in that in this video. It's a product, you have to buy it. Many people out there don't want to buy products, so if you don't want to buy anything, don't worry about it. But if you do want to water your lawn less, it's a really important tool in the shed. It's something I've been using for a few years. Now, for those of you who don't have timers or don't, I don't know, for whatever reason, you're not going to be watering the lawn at dawn. So in between like 5 and like 7 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning, if you're not going to water then, do not water in the middle of the day. Like, just don't. It's better to water the lawn in the evening. Let's call it 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock p.m. It's better. In my opinion, it's better to water in those evening hours than it is in the middle of the day. If you're going to set your sprinkler up at 10 o'clock in the morning and justify it by saying it's still morning, it's not noon yet, during the late spring and especially the early parts of summer, 10 o'clock in the morning, I mean, the sun's been up for like 5-6 hours. It's usually pretty warm at this part of the day. In my opinion, much better to set that watering session up somewhere around 7-8 o'clock at night going into the night than it is to do it in the middle of the day. Now, some would argue that doing it in the evening is going to set yourself up for disease. But in my opinion, if you're fertilizing your lawn for resiliency, for health, and not for excessive growth, then it's better to push the envelope on disease, putting water down onto the lawn in the evening than it is putting water down on in the middle of the day where you're going to be wasting water left and right. You're probably going to end up having to water your lawn twice every single week if you're putting water down in the middle of the day. You're going to lose a ton of it to evaporative loss. You think you're putting an inch of water onto the lawn, but if an enormous chunk of that is getting lost to the atmosphere due to evaporation, water is never going to go deep in the lawn. You're just not going to be able to make it 7 days between watering sessions. I personally would choose to water my lawn at 8 o'clock in the evening than I would at 10 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, we're here into opinion, so use your own judgment. Early spring. So we're talking end of March into April. Some of you guys are experiencing early spring in the early parts of May, the first half of May. We're not talking about like on the calendar early spring. We're talking about your actual weather. In the early spring, water on the lawn, so via an irrigation system, will help green your lawn up faster than just about anything. Water from the sky, I mean, think about it. It's coming from like the atmosphere. Water is coming down as rain in the early parts of spring. It's pretty cold. That water is not going to hit the ground and warm it up. But water from your irrigation system is coming from the pipes out in your city, or it's coming from a well, it's coming from underground where the water is not quite as cold as it is way up high in the clouds. If you irrigate your lawn heavily in the early parts of spring, it will green up a few days faster, maybe even a couple weeks faster than your neighbor. But I would caution you, if your ground is saturated from a lot of snow melt, or maybe you got a ton of cold rain back in like March, everything was still dormant, and your grass still, or the soil under your grass is still very wet. Just imagine this. Just take like, again, a coffee cup of water, pour it on the lawn. Figure out how long it takes that water to go into the soil. Does it just sit there on top of the soil wet like mud, or does it absorb in? If your soil is moist, then there's no reason to do a deep watering session. If your soil isn't saturated, then you can go ahead and water your lawn heavily in the very early parts of spring. It will help green it up earlier. But you're not going to want to do this once every 7 days. Evaporative loss and the usage of that water in the lawn is really slow in the early parts of spring. But there's no doubt in my mind that irrigation water will help bring your lawn out of dormancy faster than if you don't apply it. I do personally like applying irrigation water to my lawn in the early parts of spring, but I'm biased. I really like having a great lawn. Sorry that my lawn doesn't look fantastic right now. I just moved into this house. I'm working on it, guys. Subscribe to this channel, and in a few months, this is going to be probably one of the best lawns that you'll see in the neighborhood. Anyway, that's a different point. Now, for cool season grasses especially, as we push closer towards summer, many people have very big water bills. And water bills can, I mean, they're very discretionary. If you want to water your lawn and you can pay the bill, just go ahead and do it. And a cool season lawn will stay green throughout the summer. If you, I don't know, if that financial pressure is not worth it to you, don't worry about watering your lawn excessively throughout the end of spring and the hottest months of summer. So whenever your temperatures get into that hot territory where you're like literally thinking, I want to set out a kiddie pool outside and wait around in it. But those temperatures, warm season grasses love, but cool season grasses don't, and they need an excessive amount of water to stay green and growing in those temperatures. Do not feel like you have to do that. If you stop watering your lawn completely, or if you dial it back a little bit and the lawn starts browning out, it's fine. This is what we call summer dormancy, or heat stress triggered dormancy. It's healthy. It's fine. The grass itself is trying to protect itself, so it goes brown on top to reserve or to preserve its own life underground. It's waiting for fall. Cool season grasses do not like the heat, and without excessive amounts of water, they will start going dormant. Just let it happen if you don't want to financially, or I don't know, like the ecology, the ecological impact of like putting a whole bunch of extra water on your lawn. If you don't like that, just don't do it. Allow it to go brown. However, I would say in extreme drought cases, in hot weather, in northern climates with cool season grasses, you're gonna still need to put some water on the lawn. So even if you intend on having your lawn go into summer dormancy because you don't want to put a ton of water on it, make sure that lawn is getting somewhere around a quarter of an inch of water every single week. Otherwise, you're going to have a patchy recovery come fall. Parts of the lawn will die if you're giving it nothing, and it's getting nothing from the sky. What I'm saying here is continue watering your lawn during the summer, even if you intend to have it go into summer dormancy. Just water it at like a quarter strength. Quarter strength. If you're going to water it for an hour, dial it back to 15 minutes. If you're going to water it every 7 days, maybe water it the exact same, but every 20 days. The math doesn't check out on that, but still, you get what I mean. And that moves me into my last point here. Something that's going to be a little bit more personal to me and my lawn is the efficiency of the watering heads in your lawn. Now, normal watering heads, you go to any hardware store, you go to the irrigation section, you're going to find a whole bunch of heads. If you have any in-ground sprinkler heads that are overspraying onto patios or driveways or sidewalks, there literally are nozzles. You don't even have to dig the irrigation head out of the ground. Pull the nozzle up, unscrew it, take the thing out, and replace it with a different nozzle that has a shorter spray pattern, a smaller arc for the radius of the spray pattern. These things literally cost a few dollars. Like, it does not take a lot of time. You don't have to dig out your lawn. It doesn't take more than just a couple minutes to swap out the arc pattern, the actual head of your lawn. Now, I do have a video about replacing some of the in-ground sprinkler heads that I have in the lawn, which I'll put down in the description below. But the actual nozzle itself, if you're overspraying, switch the nozzle out. That's going to result in far less waste of water. You might be able to spray your lawn for a smaller duration, meaning you're going to save water on your water bill, all of that sort of stuff. It's worth doing, and it's way simpler than you realize it is, especially those of you who've never done it before. Now, for me personally, this yard that you see here is fairly blocky, but many yards, including my front yard, have curved spaces. They're irregularly shaped. So when you have an irregular shape or a curvature to the edges of your property, Traditional sprinkler systems don't deal with curvatures or irregular shapes very well. They are very wasteful in those situations. So what I'm going to be doing here at my house, I'm going to put it here in the backyard because I like consistency throughout the property. The front yard really needs it. I'm going to be putting in this special sprinkler system that I can match the exact dimensions of the space. So around curves, it will adjust itself based on the distance that it needs to throw in each direction. You can call this like a robotic sprinkler or a fancy smart sprinkler system. But basically, it's just one nozzle that goes right in the middle, and it will throw it 5 feet here and 7 feet there and 10 feet there, 30 feet that way. I don't know, 30. I don't know how far it goes. But it's basically a smart sprinkler. It's one head. So instead of having like 10 heads going all the way around the house or the yard, I'll have one right in the middle that will conform itself to the dimensions of my actual yard. I've never used this system before. It's from the Irrigation company. The purpose of it is to waste as little water as possible. For those of you who don't know, I used to live in the country. We never got sirens. This is really annoying. Anyway, they've moved on. Evergreen is an expensive solution. I get that. It's not going to be for everybody. I'm going to put it in my lawn because one of the main emphases here on this channel is being conscientious, not wasting water, not wasting fertilizer, not using chemicals. This falls in line with what I believe is important for the lawn. Plus, it's less maintenance. It's just one head. And I don't even need like a sprinkler valve system like in traditional systems. But it's expensive, so it's not for everybody. So if you're not interested in spending a whole ton of money on a really fancy, well-calibrated system, then make sure to watch the playlist up here, which is about conventional watering systems, irrigation systems, and to optimize them. The Irrigation system uses pretty large droplet sizes, which is one of the best ways to reduce wind drift. But in your actual lawn, your old-fashioned irrigation sprinkler heads, you can also go out of your way to find sprinkler heads that use larger droplet size. Everyone knows how annoying it is to run a sprinkler with wind. Larger droplet sizes are the best way to prevent wind drift loss. For those of you curious about the Irrigation system, I've also got linked somewhere here on the screen a playlist to my Irrigation installation video series here on the channel. Please take a look in the description below for some relevant links and the pinned comment as well.